Welcome everyone to the Glass Recycling Foundation's grant workshop for the upcoming grant cycle that is opening next month. My name is Maggie Orozco. I'm with RRS, a contractor to GRF, and I'm going to be moderating this session. So before we get started, we're going to review some housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded and it will be available on the GRF website at glassrecycles.org. All attendees have been muted to minimize background noise, so please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions, and we will have dedicated time at the end of the presentation to address. If you're having any technical issues, you can also let us know through the Q&A box, and we will do our best to troubleshoot the issue. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jackie and then Laura to introduce themselves. So take it away, Jackie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Kerouac-Fram. I am a senior consultant with RRS, which, as Maggie mentioned, is the managing consultancy for the Glass Recycling Foundation. And I'll be talking with you today about a lot of the technical information about the application process. And I'll hand it off to Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Laura Henneman. I'm with Sibelco. Some of us know us as Strategic Materials Inc. or SMI. I've been with the company for 10 years and have sat on the Glass Recycling Foundation board since inception, I believe. So 2016, 2017. Happy to be with you guys today and talk through some of the opportunities that we have available for this grant cycle. Quick background on the GRF. Hopefully some of you on the line have worked with the GRF previously. Maybe you've been awarded a grant previously. Maybe you've reached out for technical help around glass recycling to try to help solve some of the challenges around glass recycling. We are a nonprofit and we were formed to raise and provide the funds, which is why we're here today to help support glass recycling across the United States. That is one thing that I do want to reiterate because we receive many applications, which is fantastic. There's a lot of interest in trying to solve glass recycling. This is strictly for the United States. In the United States, some of the stats and the reasons why we exist today is about 12.3 million tons of glass is generated each year in the United States. That's not only generated, but sold into. So those are your bottles that are, your food jars, your wine bottles, your beer bottles, etc., that are ending up in our system in the United States. And that material is valuable. It is essential for manufacturing to support in the United States, both for manufacturing new bottles, fiberglass insulation, some smaller markets, low carbon concrete, etc. And they don't have enough. So the demand is there and there's not enough to help. One of the main reasons why glass or recycled glass is used to manufacture new goods is because it's displacing virgin materials and mined materials like sand. Recycled glass melts at a lower temperature than those virgin materials. So it not only displaces the need to mine our precious minerals, but also helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions because less energy is needed to melt that material. So that herein lies the challenge, right? So today, only about a third of all glass that is sold into the United States is recovered for recycling. So it hovers around 30%. We've seen some other reports that it might be a little bit less, but that is still a huge opportunity as well. So if only a third is being recovered, there's a need for that material to remain in our systems, then that is where our challenge lies and also our opportunity. But over 9 million tons of glass goes to landfill. That's our estimate. So there's a lot of work to be done. So why is that glass not being recycled? A lot of it comes down to dollars. Investment is needed both on the municipal side for budgets around providing recycling and inclusive of glass into their offerings, but also at the MRF for the material recovery facility. Some investment is needed on the glass side that hasn't been made yet. And most of the time the capital investment is pretty large. So what can we do to help recover glass in all systems and keep it from going to landfill? And that's where I think our opportunity is on the next slide. So of those 9 million tons that go to landfill, our goal is to recover as much as we can, help make those recycling systems work. Like I talked about, the demand is there. To make a new container glass bottle, they can use up to 95% recycled content. They're not pulling that today, and I think that many would love to, but either the material's not available or the colors aren't available, et cetera. So there's a lot of dynamics there, but there is opportunity there to increase how much recycled content is being used to manufacture new products like new bottles, can help meet the sustainability goals, community zero waste goals. We love to partner with communities on creative ways to recycle glass as well, and potentially provide a service to different areas of a community that maybe don't have access to recycling or glass recycling. We'd like to fill the gap that way. We talked about the fact that it would decrease energy usage, which thereby would also decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a very positive, happy manufacturing story. Of course, it can create a circular economy. Glass never wears out, so it's 100% recyclable forever. Unlike some other materials where they degrade over a certain period of time, glass is one bottle in, one bottle out. So it is really, truly a circular economy story. And the good news is the technology exists. So best practices for collection programs exist. The technology at the material recovery facility exists. The technology on the glass recycling or the secondary processing facility exists. So the technology is there. Innovation, of course, can help, but the technology is all there. It's just how do we unlock it? And this is a little bit about our impact in 2025. Obviously, we've been around for almost 10 years now. But last year alone, we diverted over almost 5,000 tons of glass, which I think converts to about 9 million pounds if you want to talk in pounds, from the projects that we awarded. We awarded over $75,000. So when you start to talk about tons versus dollars, it's also a very positive story. I know Jackie is going to talk about kind of the eligibility requirements and some of the more technical aspects of the projects that we find most attractive, but we do look at like long-term investment. So we would love to kind of invest in something as a springboard to a longer-term glass recycling project rather than something that we invest in and maybe it can't sustain itself. But we're really proud of the work that we did in 2025. And Jackie, I think this is on to you for eligibility.
It is. Thanks, Laura. That was a really great overview of the foundation and its awesome work. Who can apply for a grant from the Glass Recycling Foundation? So nonprofits, I apologize. There's a dog barking at the door. Okay. Nonprofit organizations, municipal, county, city, and state governments are all eligible. Solid waste districts, public authorities or commissions, or private industry with a strong public partner. So it's very important to note that the foundation strongly prefers to make grants to nonprofit or governmental entities. However, if you are a private industry, if you're a member of private industry, you may apply, but you have to have a strong public partner to support the grant. You have to do this work in partnership with a nonprofit or public entity. On the right there, you can see some of the previous grant recipients. The overall list over the past 10 years is much longer, but that's just a sampling of the folks that we've worked with over the last couple of years. What type of projects are eligible for support? There's two main buckets. The first is demonstration projects. These are projects that fill the gaps in the supply chain. These are equipment, these are containers, regional collection and storage strategies, hauling systems. These are the projects that provide the actual doing of the recycling. Somehow support, implement, expand the capacity of glass recycling in your jurisdiction. Projects that are more towards education and engagement are also allowed and encouraged. So these are projects that increase public awareness and improve recycling outcomes. These could include signage or education campaigns and ads or training for local community leaders. These are the projects that maybe don't have as high of an impact in terms of tons per dollar, but over the long term could really work to increase the capacity not the capacity, but the participation in glass recycling in your community. All projects must demonstrate glass circularity. Past grantees are eligible to apply. Um, what do we mean by demonstrate glass circularity? Projects should prioritize circularity by ensuring that glass is recycled into the highest and best use. So projects that show that glass will go back into the supply chain for manufacturing of products like glass containers and fiberglass will be most likely to be funded. And applicants should outline a clear plan and strategy for how your project should be implemented. So this is beyond the idea or conception stage. You should have a sense of the logistics for how your project will actually be executed. Projects can have both an infrastructure and an education component. So if you have a project that does both, it falls into both of these buckets, that's fine. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But as Laura mentioned just a moment ago, the focus of our funding is really about building capacity for future sustainability. So if you have a project that can't continue without continued funding from the foundation, it's not going to be as strong as of a contender. We're looking for projects that can enhance your long-term capacity for glass recycling. So a higher cost per ton is acceptable if the program is expected to take off and sustain itself after the grant term is complete. Some example projects that have been funded by the Glass Recycling Foundation. Laura, would you like to tell folks about these?
Yeah, I have a few here that we've highlighted, and I think that Jackie did a nice job of kind of saying, well, these are the areas that are eligible. So one is out of Northern Virginia with the purple bags, purple and yellow bags. So this was really tied to their collection, education, and community signage. So this was to help make it easier to collect that glass, knowing that it is a drop-off program. It requires residents and businesses, if they want to participate, to segregate their glass, put it in a nice strong tote that's not going to break, walk it to the bin or from your car, and drop it off. And then they're reusable as well, so you're not creating some of that waste, and they're easy to wash out. We know that sometimes there's remnants left in the glass that don't always get included in the rinse. So that was more of a collection type project that was done as far as like the totes themselves. The other ones were drop-off bins. I think one is in North Carolina. I believe that's the yellow one. And there was another one maybe in Georgia. That stair step one is not considered our best practice, but that is something that the individual county put in place. But we did help provide the bins for drop-off programs where the glass is segregated. And then the last one, I believe we provided, I don't know which city that one is or the state, but we provided the hard totes. We helped fund the hard totes with their design. It might have been in Virginia. But that was another one where it was like, okay, how can we make collection even easier? So going beyond just the bin component, which I think everybody gravitates towards, and it works well and it's great, especially if you've got the right placement. But these are programs where we're creating behavioral changes for glass recycling, and we're also helping making it a little bit more fun and a little bit more easy to do. So that's part of that sustaining component that we talk about for a program. We want a program to be successful long term.
Okay, so application components. We will look in just a moment at a video that shows you how easy the application is to complete. But in terms of what it is you'll be asked to provide as you're filling out your funding application. So a lot of basic information like your applicant information. Who are you? What's your business name or your municipality? Where is the project located? A description of the project itself. A needs assessment means tell us why this is a need in your community. What need will you be addressing by receiving this funding and completing your project? What are the goals of the project? What is the budget? So there is a $30,000 cap or a 50% of the project cost, whichever is less. So if you have a $60,000 budget for your entire project, you can request $30,000 from the GRF because that's 50% of the cost. But if your budget, for example, is $40,000 for the entire cost of the project, the most you could request would be $20,000. So it's $30,000 or 50% of the project cost, whichever is less, is the maximum amount that you can request from the foundation. The application also asks whether you have any third-party matching funds. This is very much preferred by the foundation. We want to see that there are other partners involved who are invested and excited about the project. It's not required, but it is preferred. The application also asks about the end market for the glass and end use. It asks for you to tell us how you will evaluate the success of your project. What are the metrics that you will track? Is it tonnage? Is it engagement? Is it, there are many ways to talk about the success of your project, but just making sure that it's clear that we can understand that you're paying attention to whether your project is going to be successful or not. We'll also want to know the duration of your project and how it will be sustained beyond the grant. The metrics are very important. And as we've mentioned a couple of times now, we're looking to fund projects that have bigger impacts and lower dollar per ton values. However, if there is a project that can demonstrate that this is only the beginning and that capacity will continue to expand, we are willing to entertain higher dollar per ton value applications. Okay, and now this is just a video, and Maggie, you can go ahead and start it, that shows, gives just a snapshot of the application itself. It's fully online, and it is very easy to complete. And this should be just a video that shows a few screens.
Just gonna reshare really quickly just to make sure that sound comes through. Just give me one
Oh,
second.
there isn't any sound. No sound.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it easier.
So you can see there's a description. It's very intuitive. I know some folks aren't super tech savvy, but this goes really, really smoothly. Is it playing, Maggie? Okay, here we go. So all the information that is requested, is provided, usually a question at a time, very clear what the question is. Okay, I believe that's the end of the video. So you can see it's very intuitive to use. It's very easy. We will be available for any tech questions that you have as you move through the application process. Okay, some key facts about the grant program. Applications open on May 11th. The application will be live on our website. The deadline to submit is July 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern. We anticipate announcing decisions for funding in late September. Again, apply via online application. Again, the grant award maximum is $30,000 or 50% of the total cost. Again, to mention that we prefer applications that have a third-party match of 25% or higher. This is new this year for folks who have received funding from the Glass Recycling Foundation in the past. We are going to be able to provide up to 50% of the grant award amount upon completion of the grant agreement. So in the past, this was a full reimbursement grant. meaning that you had to complete your project, to submit your receipts, and then receive reimbursement. But we acknowledge that that creates a barrier to some applicants who don't have the cash handy to be able to execute their project without any financial support. So we've made the decision to provide up to 50%, and we'll talk with you if you're a grant awardee. We'll talk with you about how much of that you would need to support the launch of your project. Up to 50% provided upon completion of the grant agreement, with the other 50% provided as a reimbursement upon completion of the project. Another new point this year, given that we are providing upfront funding, we're going to ask for a 12-month timeline from award to completion of your project. There will be some allowance for exceptions with documentation if 12 months is not feasible for your project for reasons that you can help us understand. But in general, we're going to be asking for a 12-month timeline from award to project completion. And then finally, incomplete applications will not be eligible for funding. So do make sure that you've completed all of the required fields in the application. It shouldn't actually allow you to advance without putting something in every required field, but make sure that you're providing thorough answers so that our evaluators are able to fully judge your application and understand the impact that you're trying to have in your community. Okay, some best practices and tips. Follow these tips for a strong application. And I'm just going to go through these and you can add, we will have Q&A as we've mentioned in a moment. So I understand that there may be lots of questions. So make sure that you submit by the deadline. We will not be accepting any applications after 5 p.m. on July 10th. Make sure that you answer questions directly and completely with as much detail. There may be some questions that feel repetitive, but they're not. So make sure that you don't just put the same answer down, for example, for the section on the need for your project and the goals for your project. Those are actually two distinct questions. Make sure that any information and data that you provide is defensible and well supported. This just means that if you're going to provide numbers, make sure that they're real. Estimating is fine as long as you say estimated. We just want to make sure that we can trust in the information that you're providing. And we may come back with questions if things are not clear. Have a clear and strategic plan for how your project will be executed. As I mentioned before, we prefer projects that are beyond the idea stage, that have actually either started in some way or have been given enough thought and consideration that you have a clear budget, you have a clear plan for implementation, you have partners involved. Make sure that you've given enough thought to your project that you're able to articulate all of this in your application. Again, projects must be beyond the idea phase. Include the amount requested and any matching funds from your organization. Be clear about your outcomes. Anticipated additional and new tons of glass recycled in end markets. Again, tonnage is not always the metric that we're going to be paying the most attention to, especially if it's an education project, but it is an important metric. So make sure that you're clear about your outcomes and how you're going to measure your success. And then finally, ensure that the listed contact person is responsive and knowledgeable. We may reach out with questions about your application, and we will be needing, a timely response to those questions. And so whoever you list as the contact person, please make sure that there's someone who has the ability to answer questions about your grant application. Okay, so now we've gotten to the Q&A section. First, I want to just acknowledge on the right side of the screen there, you can see that we have lots of donors who make this program possible, who fund the foundation year over year. Also on the right, you can see the board, the list of board members. That's from 2025, so it's a slightly different this year, but not very much, in case you know anybody. And you want to say thank you to them for their service to the foundation and helping make all this possible. One quick guideline about Q&A, please keep your questions not specific to your project if possible. I understand if you have to provide some context in order to ask your question, but we do have almost 100 people on this call today, and we want to make sure that we are asking questions that will help, several people possibly be able to have a successful application. And so let's see. Maggie, if you want to go ahead and give some guidelines on how this is going to go.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So on everyone's Zoom toolbar, you'll see an option to submit some questions. Please go ahead and put those in there. Avoid putting them through the chat option just so we can filter everything through the Q&A and stay a little bit more organized. And we'll address as many questions as possible. And as Jackie said, if there's something a little bit more specific or if we don't have time for something, then we can help you offline after the webinar. But we have a few number of questions here that we can go ahead and get started. So the first is, are tribal governments eligible to apply for a grant?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Great. And then can you clarify what you mean by a strong public partner? When it's like a private entity that's partnering with a public entity, what do you mean by a strong public partner?
Laura, do you want to take that one since you've seen a lot of these applications over the years?
I can, and I'll do my best. It is slightly subjective, but what we've seen from applications and grants that have worked well is when there's private business, usually if you're setting up a new collection program or something where basically the local municipality is needed or the city, like it might be them as a host site to bunker material or to have the bin. Usually that public-private partnership works really well. So when we say strong, it's one of those things where how do you define strong? But I think it's more of just, do you have buy-in where you need buy-in with your local government?
Great. Thank you. Another question. So about the deadline and the timing on submitting. So, we know the deadline is on July 10th, but does it matter at all when the application is submitted before that? Does that affect the availability of funding in any way? Will you run out of funding before July 10th? Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Sure. No, this is not a rolling review process. So nobody's doing any reviewing of any applications until after the deadline. So we will be collecting applications and then reviewing them all together. It does not matter the order in which they came into us. We will review all eligible applications at the same time after the grant window closes.
Perfect. Another application question. Are we able to download the questions before completing online and submitting them? Are those available to view?
Morgan also works with the Glass Recycling Foundation, and she's been doing a lot of the administrative behind the scenes work. Do we have those listed anywhere? If not, I'm sure we can put them on the website.
Yeah, what we normally do is we create a PDF of the questions and we'll post those when the grant is live on the grant portion of our website. So we'll have that ready when grant's open.
You.
Perfect. Let's see. So a question here again on partnering. So we are a nonprofit in Maine, and we want to open a statewide program with partner towns and cities. Is this allowed in the grant? For example, we may need to end up with 5 or more towns that are separate entities.
Yes. So this would be you would have one lead applicant, and the other municipalities or jurisdictions would be partners in the grant. But there would need to be one of you that is taking the step to be the lead applicant for the grant application. But otherwise, that sounds great. We love collaboration. We love partnerships. We love when there is greater success through greater participation.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see. You have a few match questions. So, are in-kind contributions considered in the overall budget and in the matching funds requirement?
Mm. Laura or Morgan. So a little context, I'm fairly new to the foundation, and so I keep looking to the folks who have been with us for a little bit longer, who have gone through a few grant cycles. What do we think about in kind as part of the match?
I would need to double check on that. I don't think that we included that as part of the matching funds requirement, but it may be included in the overall budget. So it's a good question. Sean, I saw that you sent that. I would need to double check. I don't want to tell you incorrectly.
I think if we don't already have a Q&A section on the website, we will put that up there, and we'll make sure to include that as part of the questions that we answer.
And I think when we launch the grant application in May, if we want to put a little blurb in there, we could do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Perfect.
Do we have another question, Maggie?
Sorry, can you not hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was speaking to myself. The next question is if there's going to be priority given based on location type. So considering maybe like a city versus a rural location.
No, I mean, not from my experience. We just look at it very uh, diplomatically, I'll say. I mean, it's really about program viability and where we can not only create a very sustainable long-term program, like we said, kind of springboard some funds to get things going, but also just the viability of the program, the cost per ton to move the glass around. We would love to provide more to rural areas, especially because I think rural areas are one that's under addressed and need the most help. But we're pretty agnostic whether it's city versus rural versus, state. So it's really just comes down to the program dynamics.
Gotcha. Okay. And what about like if a municipality and a nonprofit from the same area want to apply but separately, is that allowed? Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Sorry about that. I have like an edit screen that was blocking me. I can't really ask the question, but I could say if it's for the same program, I think it would be okay. But it would probably be a stronger application if it is for the same program to just have one grant application submitted. But Jackie, I don't know if you have additional thoughts, but I would expect if they're connected, it's going to be the same program.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Was the question that if there's one program with two applicants, is that a problem? Is that the question?
It was a municipality and a nonprofit in the same area, both applying separately if any sort of like geographic consideration is taken into consideration there because it's two entities from the same region, is how I interpreted the question.
So not necessarily the same project, just in the same region. I think that's fine.
Okay,
Again, we're
Great.
we're we're
That's fine.
looking at impact here, not necessarily geography.
got it. Okay. Um, how many grants or funding amount are you expected to award this year, or is that kind of a to be determined based on the grants applications received?
We are anticipating awarding, I think, more than last year. We are anticipating awarding about $125,000 in grants this year. So there is more pie to share this year. But the grant amounts vary. So they are all the way from $5,000 up to $30,000. So how it also, the number that we award really is affected by the quality of the applications, the sizes of the requests. But the pot of money that we have to award this year is greater.
Great, that's great to hear. Um, let's see, what kind of reporting is required once the grant is awarded?
So we have a year-end application, not application, grant report form. So at the conclusion of the 12 months after you have, had the funding and completed your project, we will be asking how much tonnage you've collected through the program, How does that compare to previous years? How many people, how many customers or residents or households your program served? Any challenges or successes for the project that are worth noting? Was there any publicity or press coverage of the grant project? Yeah, I think that's it. So, but heavy emphasis on how many tons did the project facilitate collection for, and whether that was an increase. But definitely also paying attention to, I think challenges and successes are also really important because that helps us learn more as a foundation, which types of projects might be more likely to be successful in the future.
Perfect. Let's see, a clarifying question on education projects. So if the project is for signage, does it have to be just for glass, or can the money be used for an entire recycling project, for example, like revamping a convenience center, but it also includes glass recycling?
That is a great question. We have not seen that in an application. It's been glass specific only. And part of that was signage to help bring awareness to the glass only bin. It would be the totes that are intended just for glass. Now, if somebody else is using them for plastic or PET or something, so be it. We can only control so much. But I think it would be a stronger application if it was more specific to glass.
Yeah, I would say it's not ineligible, but it would be stronger if it were just glass. If it is a project that handles other types of recyclables, I think we would be paying a lot of attention to the tonnage and whether the investment from the foundation will result in significant tonnage diverted. And if it does, then it's a contender. But if glass is just a smaller piece of a larger puzzle, it's probably going to be not as strong of an application.
Okay. And then on the side of demonstration projects, do you consider grants for vehicles? So, for instance, like a mobile drop-off dumpster or a large cargo van for pickup?
Yes, that's considered, yeah, equipment, infrastructure, anything that facilitates the collection um, or transportation of the glass is eligible.
Okay. And does GRF have a list of recommended equipment providers, or can applicants, are they free to choose the vendor that they'd like?
You can whomever you'd like to work with.
Perfect. Maybe answer that one. We have a question if the recording is going to be available before May 11th. Yes, absolutely. It'll be available by early next week at the latest. So um, we'll post that on social media and just keep an eye out on the website that will be available there. Um, okay, so this question is, we're from California, and I want to ask if the grant prioritizes equipment or bins over outreach and education, or are both equally competitive?
It, to clarify, the question is around is equipment or the bins considered equal?
So I think it's between demonstration and education projects, if there's a priority there, or are they kind of looked at the same in terms of what's going to get priority funding.
I don't think we have a specific priority as far as funding. We really just look at the amount, the impact, I'll say, the impact of the glass program. I think a lot of what we've seen is like, if it's just education only, there might be a program that's already robust in place, and this is just to increase. And then there's reporting requirements of like the impact of that education program. But otherwise, we see what we get in. We get in a lot of interesting ones, and then we start to prioritize by impact rather than just education versus equipment.
And I'll add also, Maggie, since you mentioned the location, it triggered for me that I have not said the words yet that only projects that are based in the United States are eligible for funding. That's something that is really important, and I have not I have not voiced that yet on this call. So yeah, only projects based in the US are eligible.
Great. Let's see, what info is needed for a town who's going to be sending glass to another large organization who will then be sending and selling to a manufacturer? Proof of recycling is what I'm asking, but what will the town need if going through this process to get to recycling?
So I think that's more on the reporting side, Jackie. And if you have something to add, feel free to jump in. But usually it's tonnage reports, volume reports. I don't, to my knowledge, we haven't asked for like individual BOLs or invoicing or anything like that. It's a little bit trust but verify on some of that, but also I think the end market would have to be identified. So whether it's going to your secondary processor to then send on to the manufacturer, there's ways that we can verify that as well. We're well represented on the GRF of kind of all aspects of the value chain. For those that don't know, I represent the secondary processor. So if a program was put in place, we would be the benefactors of that material. We'd recycle it and send it to a customer. You know, I've verified programs from time to time if needed as well.
Okay. Um, Looking through here. Our state just passed an EPR program that's going to go live in 2030. If we're awarded a large grant for a vehicle, but then won't need it after 2030, will this negate our grant because the sustainable time is only for 2 to 3 years?
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to understand. So they will or will not need the equipment after. They will not need it.
They will not need it after 2030.
Mm.
And so they're asking, is this going to negate our grant because the sustainable time is only for 2 to 3 years?
Think if I were in that situation and was going to apply for the grant, I would make sure to address what you would want to do with that equipment. Like, let's say if it's the equipment piece, after EPR is in effect, is there a way to repurpose it for another project that's related to glass or glass recycling? Those things would all just make the application stronger, but certainly we are looking for long-term impact. Not to say that it wouldn't be considered, it absolutely would, especially if the program is very high volume over 2, 3 years or whatever the timeline is going to be. But it would be something that we would consider in the application.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's see, would a project be considered if it lowered cost per ton, but it didn't necessarily increase overall tonnage?
Yes, it would be considered. I don't think I've ever had a scenario come across my desk yet for that. So that's very unique and creative. And if there's savings there, we would absolutely consider it. I can't think of a scenario where we have. Of course, our overall goal though is to create incremental tons in the system. But if it's helping to sustain and grow a program, there could be a good argument there in the application. That would be my take.
Okay. Um, we went over a few best practices, but are there specific types of glass recycling projects that have been the most successful or competitive in past funding cycles?
I would have to review all the projects to tell you exactly where those lie, but I can tell you the things that are pretty much known to work well would be creating like the hub and spoke model of a lot of little areas of where glass needs to be collected and then aggregated into like a concrete bunker so that it can go by an end dump, which just helps keep the cost low for freight and logistics. Sometimes those work really well. So we've funded bunkers in the past. I think we've received applications for like front end loaders. Those work extremely well. Drop off programs also work extremely well. That's where I think a lot of that education communication signage really has been a nice partner to that program because you're creating a behavioral change. So maybe at one time it was going in the curbside. Maybe they're throwing it in their trash bin. Maybe they're still throwing it in the recycling bin and they shouldn't if glass isn't accepted in the program. Now we've got to have an awareness that there is an opportunity to recycle it somewhere else. It's not as easy as taking it to your curb. You kind of have to go on an additional errand. So that signage awareness education goes hand in hand. Those are probably the two most popular and successful that we've had so far. So both an aggregation site, and that sometimes goes hand in hand with your strong partner, your strong public partner. And then also the drop-off program. And we've even seen the ones where maybe the city only has one drop-off program for the entire city, and now they want three. So it's expanding an existing program or creating a new program altogether. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and if there's any further questions, feel free to continue to send them through the Q&A. But another one on project eligibility, would a project be considered if it's focused on developing research for recycled glass sand inclusion in wetland restoration on top of increasing recycled glass circularity?
I will give my answer, and Jackie might have a different stance. Jackie's very good on the technical side. Um, I would say it's important work. We absolutely support it. Know that there are some of those programs happening now. I think for the purposes of what this nonprofit is trying to do, it likely would not fund the research component. But if you want to submit an application and open our eyes with some of the creativity there, we're happy to do that. But really, our goal is to divert more as quickly as possible and into the recycling system.
Perfect. Let's see. Can a state regulatory agency be involved with a private sector company to help gain regulatory approval for beneficial reuse of recycled or processed glass?
Is that I'm working to understand the question if it's more grant related or just technical support needs.
I thought maybe it was eligibility on the entities if a state regulatory agency can work with a private sector company. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but
So one thing that I'll say is that the grants are not intended to fund advocacy. So that's one piece. So we won't fund, for example, lobbying or communications efforts from private industry to state regulators to try and affect policy. That's not within the bounds of the eligibility. But if the question is if the grant is coming from a state entity to perhaps gather information or somehow position legislation so that it is practical and feasible and able to be enacted appropriately by private industry. I'm just not sure what the dollars would be used for there. We're really, a lot of the grant funding is positioned toward purchasing of items or purchasing of services, such as, you know, if it's education and outreach, it's like design services or printing services, or if it's equipment purchases. So I think that would be a question that you might want to submit through email and get a little bit more of a detailed response. And we'll provide the email in just a moment.
yeah, we have a few questions asking if people can speak to staff specifically about their projects. So yes, there is an opportunity for that as well. Let's see, a few questions about the grants. Typically, what are the average grant size in 2025? I don't know if you're able to give us any insight there.
Well, I can tell you that from the 2025 impact report, which you can find on our website, the glassrecyclingfoundation.org. I think that's still, we had some merging with the Glass Recycling Coalition, but We had 3 projects that we highlighted within that report. One was Baldwin County, Alabama. That was just over $20,000. City of Macomb, Illinois, hopefully I said that correctly, was 15,000. And then the city of Omaha, Nebraska was about 13,000. So they're about 20, between 10 and 20,000. We have received grant applications in the past that are much higher value, and that's completely acceptable and fine. Again, we just go back to the benchmark of kind of the most bang for your buck to make an impact, move the most glass volume to the right places and away from landfill.
Great, thank you. It's an interesting one. Would a new invention that increases the collection of glass from businesses be eligible for the grant?
I would say yes, potentially, on what's the ask there. If the invention requires equipment and can show diversion for the glass going into the recycling system, why not? So I wouldn't discourage the application. We just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen anything like that yet.
All right. This question is about secondary processing infrastructure. We are currently seeing our glass diverted to fiberglass aggregate. What specific secondary processing infrastructure does the GRF prioritize for funding to shift this material back to bottle?
That is a good question. That is a loaded question. That is a complex answer. I would say ask that question maybe offline. There's so many dynamics that go into the whys of why that might be happening. So it could be everything from lack of color sortation at the facility. It could be lower grade material. It could be a plate glass only facility, your post-industrial. It could be vicinity of your end markets. So freight and logistics play a huge component in that. And then each furnace has its own specification. So there's a lot that goes into that. But I will say from the GRF perspective, we have representation from a lot of the different markets. We support all of the markets. But there is a hierarchy of glass. Glass to glass is the highest and best use, short of refillable programs. And then you kind of work down. So I know there was a question about beneficial reuse. We're supportive of those in certain scenarios, certain situations where glass can't be recovered, and that's the only alternative. But we do work really hard to make sure that the glass is either going back into a circular system or being used in the best way possible. Don't mean to not give an answer. It's just it's a long-winded answer that we could probably spend hours on. So feel free to send me an email if you want to discuss further. I'll make sure my email's in the chat too.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Similar eligibility question. Does the grant support beneficial use and conservation of natural resources for glass, or does it need to really only go for equipment that produces new bottle glass for recycling?
It is a good question. I'm still working to understand it a little bit. I would say the conservation side is important. We would take it into consideration, but again, just kind of going back to the goal of why the foundation was created was to say there is glass generated, it's in the system, majority of it is going to landfill. How do we get more out? So if there's conservation efforts that would directly and quickly address diverting glass from a landfill, then that would be kind of a great application that would, be higher as far as priority. But if it's research, if it's something a little bit less directly involved, then that's harder for us to, as a board, make the connection. Again, if there's a discussion point, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer or get you to the right person.
Great, thank you, Laura. I do want to leave a little bit of time at the end just to wrap up. So maybe this will be the last question. And I apologize for everyone that we didn't get to. Feel free to contact us offline and we'll help you out as best as we can. But last question here, our nonprofit and partners have already started recycling glass, and our goal was to create a glass recycling company that is profitable and otherwise successful over the long term. Is this approach to sustainability an acceptable goal for this grant? So it looks like they want to create a glass recycling company.
Potentially, yes, depending on how the application is submitted. So again, if you're reviewing kind of the eligibility and the items that are eligible, maybe, and I hate to use this example again because we've said it a lot, but it's an easy one, is maybe you're starting a glass recycling company and you need a front end loader. Those are kinds of some things that you could apply for. And then in conjunction with that, say, and because of this glass recycling company, we're going to divert 5,000 tons a year from the landfill. And this is the impact we're going to have. I think it's a matter of how you would submit the application itself to make sure that you're adhering to the goals and eligibility around this grant cycle.
Gotcha. Great. Well, yeah, like I said, I do want to leave some time to wrap up and talk about next steps, but appreciate everyone submitting their questions. It's great to see all the interest in the upcoming grant cycle. Um, so I think Jackie, if you can talk about next steps.
Yes. So as we've mentioned a few times here, the grant applications will open on May 11th on the Glass Recycling Foundation website. Please subscribe to our newsletter and follow us to be the first to know when the grant cycle opens in future years. It will open on May 11th this year. The dates are not exactly the same every year. You can scan that QR code to get updates. Also, there is an a website at the bottom there that will allow you to contact us. Also, on the next slide, I believe is my our email address that you can use to submit specific questions about the grant program as the grant application opens and you are starting to work on your applications. Those of us on the foundation team will be paying attention to this email address inbox and getting back to you as quickly as we can. But yeah, feel free to submit questions. Get ready for the application open date. Make sure you submit your application by the deadline, 5 p.m. on July 10th, making sure I'm saying that date correctly. And again, we anticipate having decisions by late September. Sometimes we miss it a little bit. So don't stress if you haven't heard from us by the end of September. Know that we're working on it, but that is our goal this year. We are all volunteer board, and so sometimes it takes a little while. Yeah, I think that's it. And Maggie has a few final housekeeping notes, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Laura, for a great presentation. I think people found it very insightful. Um, Just a reminder to everyone that this presentation is recorded and it will be posted on the website at glassrecycles.org. We'll get that on there by early next week at the latest. So if you want to review anything that was said, feel free to take a look. If you have any specific questions or if we didn't get to your question today, feel free to reach out and we can work with you one-on-one to talk about your potential project. Whenever the grant cycle opens, fingers crossed, May 11th, we'll put that on our website, on social media, and we'll send out our newsletter. So make sure that you're subscribed and following us so you can be the first to hear about when that opens. But thank you again for joining us today. We hope you found this presentation insightful and helpful, and have a wonderful day.